The words hit like a slap across my face. You're just like your mother. Dad's voice dripped with contempt as he stabbed his fork into the pot roast I'd spent hours preparing. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the gentle clink of silverware against plates. My name is Julia, and I've spent 29 years trying to prove I'm nothing like the woman who walked out on us when I was 12. But tonight, as I stared at my brother Chris across our weekly family dinner table, I realized maybe being like her wasn't such a bad thing after all. Jules, come on, Chris pleaded, his boyish charm cranked up to 11. It's just a temporary setback. I'll pay you back this time, I swear. I set down my wine glass harder than intended. Like you paid me back the last 3 times? Or the time before that? That's different. $40,000, Chris. That's how much I've given you over the past 2 years. Money I saved for a down payment on a house. Dad cleared his throat. Julia, your brother is going through a rough patch. Family helps family. Does family enable family to gamble away their life savings? The words escaped before I could stop them. Chris's face reddened. I told you, it's not gambling. I'm investing. In what? Underground poker games? Sports betting? Or is it those sketchy crypto schemes this time? That's enough. Dad's fist came down on the table, making the dishes jump. Your brother has a plan. He just needs a little help getting back on his feet. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He's had plans for the last 15 years, Dad. Remember when he dropped out of college to become a day trader? Or when he convinced you to remortgage the house for his sure thing investment? At least he's trying, Dad shot back. What have you done except work that dead-end job at the publishing house? That dead-end job pays my bills, and apparently everyone else's too. Chris leaned forward, eyes glistening. Jules, please, I'm in trouble. These guys, they're not the kind you want to owe money to. My stomach clenched. I'd heard this before, the threats, the dangerous people, the urgent need for cash. Every time, I'd given in, telling myself it was the last time, that Chris would finally learn his lesson. No, I said quietly. What? I said no, Chris. I'm done. Dad pushed his chair back with a screech. Well, I guess we know who you really are now. Your mother would be proud, always thinking of yourself first. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse. You know what, Dad? Maybe she was right to leave. Maybe she saw something I'm only just beginning to see. Julia Mason, don't you dare. What? Tell the truth. That's always been the problem in this family, hasn't it? We pretend everything's fine while Chris destroys himself, and you enable him every step of the way. Chris's voice cracked. Jules, please don't go. I need you. I paused at the doorway, fighting back tears. No, what you need is help. Real help. And as long as Dad keeps covering for you, you'll never get it. If you walk out that door, Dad called after me, don't bother coming back. I turned to face them one last time. Chris slumped in his chair, looking smaller than his 31 years. Dad, standing rigid with anger, his face a mirror of disappointment I'd seen 1,000 times before. You know what's funny, I said. Mum left a note when she went. I found it years later, hidden in her jewelry box. Want to know what it said? Sometimes loving someone means walking away. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but it might as well have been a thunderclap. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with messages. Probably Chris, maybe Dad, possibly both. I ignored them. Instead, I pulled up my best friend Zoe's number. Hey, I said when she answered. Remember that crazy idea we talked about? The one about exposing everything? You mean the nuclear option? She sounded concerned. Are you sure? I watched the lights go out in my childhood home's windows, one by one. Yeah, I think it's time. Can you come over? Give me 20 minutes and a bottle of wine. As I drove away, Mom's words echoed in my head. Sometimes loving someone means walking away. But sometimes, I thought, it also means fighting back. And I was done walking away. Holy shit, Zoe whispered, scrolling through my laptop. You've documented everything. I nodded, pouring us each another glass of wine. My living room floor was covered with papers, bank statements, loan documents, screenshots of threatening texts from Chris's bookies, and photos of him entering known gambling establishments. I started keeping records after the second time he asked for money, I explained. Something told me I'd need proof someday. Zoe picked up a bank statement. 10,000 to some guy named Victor, in cash. That was last March. Chris said it was for a business investment. I followed him that day. He went straight to an underground poker game in the warehouse district. And your dad really has no idea? I laughed bitterly. Oh, he knows. He just pretends not to. Look at this. I pulled up an email chain. Dad's been taking money from his retirement fund to cover Chris's debts. He's burned through almost half of it. My phone buzzed again. The 15th text from Chris since dinner. I glanced at it. Please, Jules, they're giving me 48 hours. I'm scared. Zoe caught me looking. Don't you dare answer him. I wasn't going to. I tossed the phone aside. But I keep thinking about what happens when they really come for him. What if... Stop. Zoe grabbed my hands. That's exactly how they keep pulling you back in. Fear, guilt, family obligation. When does it end? She was right. I'd been playing this game for years, watching Chris spiral deeper while Dad enabled him. Every time I tried to help, it only made things worse. So what's the plan? Zoe asked, reaching for her laptop. We've got enough evidence here to write a book. I pulled up a web page showing Pearl Gibson's latest exposé. She's perfect. She specializes in stories about family corruption and addiction. Remember that piece she did last year about the judge who kept covering up his son's DUIs? You're really going to do this? Go public? Not me directly. I started creating a new email account. Everything will be anonymous, but people need to know. Not just about Chris, but about how families like ours enable addiction, how we pretend everything's fine while someone we love destroys themselves. My phone rang. Dad this time. I declined the call. What about your job? Zoe asked. If this gets traced back to you, I've thought about that. I pulled out a resignation letter I'd drafted. I've got savings, not as much as I should, thanks to Chris, but enough. And I've been freelancing on the side. I'll manage. We spent the next hour organizing the evidence, scanning documents, and crafting an email to Pearl. My hands shook as I attached the files. Wait, Zoe said just before I hit send. Are you absolutely sure? This isn't just exposing Chris, it's your whole family. Once it's out there, you know what I found yesterday? I opened my drawer and pulled out an old newspaper clipping. Mom's obituary from 3 years ago. She died alone in a small apartment in Oregon. Never remarried, never had other kids. Just disappeared. Julia. She tried to tell Dad about Chris's gambling when it first started in high school, begged him to get Chris help. Dad accused her of trying to ruin our family's reputation. Sound familiar? Zoe squeezed my hand. You're not her, Jules. You're not running away. No, I agreed, clicking send on the email. I'm standing my ground. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the sent confirmation appear. My phone buzzed again. A text from Chris. Found someone else to loan me the money. Don't worry about it anymore. You've made your choice. Shit, Zoe muttered, reading over my shoulder. That doesn't sound good. I felt a chill. Chris's someone else usually meant people who charged astronomical interest rates and didn't take no for an answer. But for the first time, I didn't immediately reach for my phone to rescue him. How long do you think before Pearl responds? Zoe asked. Could be days, could be never. I closed my laptop. But at least I've done something. No more enabling, no more pretending. Zoe hugged me tight. Want me to stay over? I shook my head. I need to be alone tonight, process everything. After she left, I sat in my darkened apartment, staring at the city lights outside. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Dad, 5 from Chris, and dozens of unread messages. I turned it off. On my coffee table, Mom's obituary caught my eye. The photo showed her young, before everything fell apart, smiling at the camera with hope in her eyes. I picked it up, running my finger over her face. I get it now, Mom, I whispered. I finally get it. The weight of what I'd just done settled over me. There was no going back now. The truth was out there, making its way to Pearl Gibson's inbox, waiting to explode like a time bomb in the heart of our carefully constructed lies. 3 days after sending the email, I was making coffee when my phone lit up with an unknown number. My heart stopped when I answered. "Is this Julia?" The voice was professional, direct. "This is Pearl Gibson. I received your materials." I gripped the counter. "Yes, I wasn't sure you'd call." "I almost didn't. Anonymous tips are usually dead ends. But your documentation is thorough. Would you be willing to meet?" 2 hours later, I sat across from Pearl in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catch everything. "So," she said, spreading out printouts of my evidence, "why now?" "Because nothing else has worked. Because—" my voice caught as a couple walked past our table. "Because I'm watching my brother kill himself slowly while my father writes checks to cover the grave." Pearl nodded, taking notes. "And you're willing to go on record?" "No," I said firmly. "The story needs to be anonymous. My family, they can't know it came from me. That makes it harder to verify. We'd need—" My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Family meeting. Tonight. 7 p.m. Non-negotiable." "Everything okay?" Pearl asked, noting my expression. "Family dinner. They do this when they want to guilt me into something." I showed her the text. "Want to see their values in action?" Pearl's eyebrows rose. "You'd let me observe?" "From a distance. The restaurant they always choose has a bar with a clear view of the dining room. That evening, I walked into Salvatore's, our family's go-to restaurant for important discussions. Dad and Chris were already seated at our usual table. I could feel Pearl watching from the bar, nursing a glass of wine. "Julia," Dad stood, trying to hug me. I stepped back. "Sit down, please. We need to talk." Chris looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, hands shaking slightly as he sipped his water. "Jules, I'm sorry about the other night." "Are you?" I sat down, keeping my voice level. "Or are you sorry I stopped enabling you?" "That's exactly the attitude we need to discuss," Dad interjected. "This family needs to stand together. Your brother—" "Found someone else to loan him money," I finished. "How much this time, Chris?" Chris stared at his plate. 50,000. Jesus Christ. I felt the blood drain from my face. "From who?" "That's not important," Dad cut in. "What's important is helping your brother out of this situation. I've already put in 30,000 from my retirement fund. If you could just—" "No." I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Do you even hear yourselves? This isn't help. It's suicide by installments." "Keep your voice down," Dad hissed. "What will people think?" "They'll think exactly what's true, that this family is destroying itself to protect a lie." The memory hit me suddenly. Mom standing in our kitchen 12 years ago, screaming these same words at Dad, while 17-year-old Chris sat crying at the table, confessing to stealing from her jewelry box to pay gambling debts. "Your mother never understood family loyalty," Dad said quietly. "I had hoped you would be different." "Loyalty?" I laughed, loud enough that nearby diners turned to look. "Is that what we're calling this slow-motion tragedy? Tell me, Dad, what happens when your retirement fund runs dry? When Chris borrows from the wrong people? When—" "That's enough." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You're either with this family or against it. Choose now." I looked at Chris, seeing the scared teenager he used to be overlaid with the desperate man he'd become. "I choose truth," I said softly. "I choose actually helping, not enabling. I choose—" "You choose to abandon your family," Dad finished. "Just like her." I grabbed my purse, hands shaking. "Mom didn't abandon us, Dad. She tried to save us. I see that now." As I walked out, I caught Pearl's eye at the bar. She gave me a slight nod. My evidence was no longer just papers and screenshots. She'd witnessed our dysfunction firsthand. Outside, the night air hit my face like a slap. My phone buzzed with a text from Pearl. "I'm running the story. This needs to be told." Another text followed immediately from Chris. I know it was you who contacted the journalist. I saw you look at her. You're dead to me. I leaned against the cold brick wall, letting the tears finally come. A memory surfaced. Mom's last words to me before she left. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it breaks your heart. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Dad and Chris, but I didn't read them. Instead, I pulled up Zoe's number. "It's happening," I said when she answered. "The story's going to run." "Are you okay?" I watched through the restaurant window as Dad comforted a crying Chris, both of them ignoring my empty chair. "No," I answered honestly, "but I think, maybe, someday I will be." The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Family values and fatal flaws, the hidden cost of enabling addiction, blazed across the front page of the city's largest newspaper. My hands trembled as I read Pearl's article, seeing our family's darkest secrets laid bare in stark black and white. My phone exploded. First came the text from Zoe. "Holy shit, it's everywhere. Are you okay?" Then the flood began. Relatives, family friends, people I hadn't heard from in years, all wanting to know if I'd seen it, if it was true, if I knew who could have exposed our family like this. I was hiding in my apartment when the pounding started. "Open the damn door, Julia!" Chris's voice boomed through the hallway. "I know you're in there!" I peered through the peephole. Chris looked wild, disheveled, nothing like the polished golden child he usually pretended to be. "Go away, Chris. It was you, wasn't it?" He slammed his fist against the door again. "That journalist, I saw you looking at her that night at Salvatore's. You did this." My neighbor's door creaked open. Mrs. Chen poked her head out, phone in hand. "Everything okay, Julia? Should I call someone?" "It's fine," I called back, even as Chris continued ranting. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "Dad's partners are pulling out of the firm. My investors are demanding their money back. Everyone knows." "That's the point," I said through the door. "No more secrets, no more lies. These people will kill me, Julia. Is that what you want? Your own brother dead?" Mrs. Chen was definitely dialing now. I heard her speaking quietly into her phone. "The only person killing you is yourself," I said, "and Dad's been helping you do it for years. You fucking bitch." Something crashed against my door, probably his fist again. "You're just like Mom, a selfish, traitorous—" "Is there a problem here?" A deep voice cut through Chris's tirade. Building security, finally. "This is a family matter," Chris snapped. "Sir, we've had complaints. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Tell my sister she's dead to me," Chris spat. "Tell her." "Sir, now!" I waited until I heard the elevator doors close, before sliding down against my door, heart pounding. My phone buzzed again. Dad this time. "How could you?" His voice was ice cold when I answered. "Your own family. Someone had to do something." "Do something? You've destroyed us. The firm's reputation is in tatters. Your Aunt Sarah's charity foundation is returning Chris's donations. Money he borrowed from me, by the way. Everyone knows our business." "Good," I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. Maybe now Chris will get real help instead of blank checks. Help? He's talking about running away, disappearing before his creditors come for him. Is that what you wanted? The words hit me like a punch. He's what? Congratulations, Julia. You didn't just expose our family. You might have signed your brother's death warrant. The line went dead. I immediately called Zoe. "I'm coming over," she said before I could speak. "Don't move." While I waited, I scrolled through social media. The story was everywhere. People were sharing it, commenting, tagging our family members. Some defended us, calling it a private matter. Others praised the exposure of toxic family dynamics and enabling behavior. A message popped up from an unknown number. "Thank you for telling this story. My brother is just like Chris. Maybe now my parents will finally see what they're doing." Then another. "My family enabled my gambling for years, lost everything. This article might save lives." More messages flooded in. Stories of addiction, enabling, families torn apart by secrets. Each one felt like validation, even as my heart ached for Chris. Zoe arrived with wine and takeout. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up a local news website. There was Chris, caught on someone's phone camera, being escorted out of a casino. The timestamp showed it was from just an hour ago. "He's still gambling," my voice cracked. "Even now." "That's not the worst part." Zoe scrolled down. "Look who he was with." The grainy image showed Dad, following Chris into the casino, checkbook in hand. I stared at the photo, feeling something break and rebuild inside me. "They're never going to change, are they?" "Not unless they're forced to," Zoe said gently. "You did the right thing, Jules." My phone buzzed again. Pearl Gibson. "The follow-up stories are pouring in," she said when I answered. "Other families are coming forward. You've started something important here." I looked at the photo of Chris and Dad again, then at the messages from strangers sharing their own stories of family addiction. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" Pearl's voice was kind but firm. "Now we wait for the truth to do its work. It won't be pretty, but it's necessary." After I hung up, I opened my laptop and began to write. Not for Pearl this time, but for myself, for Mom, for everyone trapped in the cycle of enabling and denial. The truth was out. The real question was, what would rise from its ashes? A week after the story broke, I was cleaning out my childhood bedroom at Dad's house. He wasn't home, and I had a spare key. That's when I found Mom's diary, tucked behind a loose baseboard I'd accidentally kicked while moving boxes. My phone rang, just as I opened the worn leather cover. "Jules." Chris's voice was different, hollow, desperate. "I need to see you." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." He paused. "I'm outside Dad's house. I saw your car." My heart stopped. "How did you—" "Just come outside. Please." I clutched Mom's diary to my chest and walked downstairs. Chris stood on the front lawn, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven. "You shouldn't be here," I said, keeping my distance. "They're coming for me, Jules." His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "Victor's guys. They gave me until midnight to pay everything back, with interest." "How much?" $120,000. I felt sick. "Jesus, Chris." "Yeah," he laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "Dad's tapped out. His partners forced him into early retirement after your little exposé. The firm's distancing itself from the scandal." "Our scandal," I corrected. "And maybe that's exactly what needed to happen." He took a step toward me. I backed away. "You know what's funny?" His voice turned ugly. "I found Mum's old letters last night. She used to write to me after she left. Did you know that?" I gripped the diary tighter. "No." She begged me to get help, said she'd pay for rehab therapy, whatever I needed. He flicked his cigarette away. I threw them all away, told Dad she was trying to turn me against him. "Chris, you want to know why she really left?" He was closer now, eyes wild. "Because I stole her wedding ring to pay a debt. Told Dad she must have lost it. He believed me. He always believed me. And she just broke." The diary felt heavy in my hands. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you won." He threw his arms wide. "Congratulations, sister dear. You exposed all our dirty little secrets. Made Mom proud. But guess what? I'm still gambling. Dad's still covering for me. Nothing's changed except now everyone knows what a fucked up family we are." "Things have changed," I said quietly. "You're here, telling the truth for once." "The truth?" He laughed again, that horrible broken sound. "The truth is, I need that 120,000 by midnight or I'm dead. That's why I'm here. One last chance to beg my righteous sister for help." I opened the diary, pulled out a business card tucked between its pages. "Here." "What's this?" "Gambling addiction counselor. Mum's old therapist. She's still practicing." Chris stared at the card, then crumpled it. "I don't need a shrink. I need money." "No, what you need is to hit rock bottom. And maybe this is it." "Rock bottom?" He grabbed my arm. "You don't understand. These people will kill me." "Let go of me." Not until you help me. One last time. Please, Jules. I wrenched away from him. You want to know what Mom wrote in this diary? About the night she left? I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Sometimes love means watching them fall. Fuck you, he spat. Fuck you and fuck Mom and fuck your self-righteous. Everything okay here? A police car had pulled up to the curb. My neighbor across the street must have called them. Chris backed away, hands up. Just a family discussion. Ma'am? The officer looked at me. My brother was just leaving, I said firmly. Chris's face crumpled. Jules, please, I'm begging you. Go to the counselor, Chris. Or don't, but I'm done enabling you. The police waited until Chris got in his car and drove away. I sat on the front steps, opening Mom's diary with trembling hands. My phone buzzed. Zoe, you okay? Your neighbor called me about Chris showing up. I found Mom's diary, I texted back. Can you come over? On my way, I began to read, Mom's familiar handwriting bringing tears to my eyes. My dearest Julia, if you're reading this, you've finally found the truth I couldn't tell you. The hardest part of leaving wasn't walking away from the lies. It was walking away from you. But sometimes the only way to save someone is to show them how to save themselves. I looked up at the house where we'd all lived our carefully constructed lies, where Mom had finally broken free, where Chris had just begged for one last chance to keep destroying himself. The diary held more secrets, I knew, more truth, more pain. But for the first time, I was ready to read it all. You need to see this. Zoe thrust her phone at me as soon as she walked in. The local news website was open to a fresh headline. Local attorney Jordan steps down amid family scandal. New allegations surface. I skimmed the article, my stomach dropping. Financial misconduct. Dad was stealing from his clients. Keep reading. The words blurred together. Multiple instances of misappropriated funds, covering gambling debts, client trust accounts. He was using client money to pay Chris's debts, I whispered. My phone rang. Dad. Don't answer it, Zoe warned. I put it on speaker instead. Hello? I'm outside your apartment. Dad's voice was eerily calm. We need to talk. I'm not there. I'm at your house, actually, reading Mom's diary. A long pause. Stay there. I'm coming. Dad. The line went dead. Zoe grabbed the diary. We should go, now. No. I took the diary back. I need to know everything. And so does he. 20 minutes later, Dad's car pulled into the driveway. He looked older somehow, defeated. The proud man who'd ruled our family with ironclad rules about appearance and reputation was gone. The firm knows everything, he said without preamble, walking into the living room. They're launching an investigation. How much did you take? He sank into his armchair. 200,000, maybe more. I lost track. Jesus, Dad. I was going to pay it back, he said quietly, once Chris got back on his feet. Stop. I opened the diary. Listen to this. Jordan knows about the missing client funds. He caught me looking at the accounts, said if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I never saw the kids again. Dad's face went white. Where did you... She knew, Dad. She knew you were stealing back then, too. The same pattern, covering for gambling debts, trying to hide the shame of our family's addiction. Your mother didn't understand. She understood perfectly. I flipped to another page. The worst part isn't the stealing or the lying. It's watching my children learn that love means covering up someone's crimes. I can't let them believe this is normal. Enough! Dad stood up, reaching for the diary. I pulled it away. No, you don't get to hide the truth anymore. Mom left because you were teaching us that love means lying, that family means fraud, that loyalty means destroying ourselves to protect the guilty. I did everything for this family. You did everything to protect your reputation, I corrected, and now you've lost it anyway. His shoulders sagged. What do you want from me, Julia? I want you to read this. I handed him a printed email. It's from the gambling counselor, the one whose card was in Mom's diary. Chris checked himself into rehab this morning. Dad's hand shook as he read. Why? Because he finally hit bottom. Because there's no one left to save him from himself. I paused. Because sometimes love means letting go. They'll arrest me, he whispered. Once the investigation. Probably. I took back the email. But maybe that's what you need too. Your own rock bottom. My phone buzzed. A text from Chris's rehab center. Patient wishes to inform family he's safely checked in. No visitors for 30 days. He's really doing it, Dad asked, seeing my expression. He's trying. Finally. I stood up. The question is, what are you going to do? I could run, he said softly. Take what's left, start over somewhere. Like Mum did. He flinched. Except she ran to save herself, I continued. To save us, even though we didn't understand it then. You'd be running to save your pride. The scandal is already here, Dad. The truth is out, all of it. He buried his face in his hands. After a long moment, he looked up. There's a managing partner meeting tomorrow. They're expecting my resignation and a full confession. Good. I handed him Mum's diary. Read it. All of it. Maybe then you'll understand why she left. Why I had to expose everything. Why Chris finally hit bottom. And you? He looked old, vulnerable. Will you ever forgive me? I don't know, I answered honestly. But I do know this. Real love, real family. It's not about keeping secrets or enabling destruction. It's about truth, even when it hurts. Even when it costs us everything. Dad nodded slowly, clutching the diary. Your mother, she tried to tell me that, didn't she? Yes, I said softly. And now you have to decide. Are you finally ready to listen? He opened the diary with trembling hands and began to read. The rehab center looked more like a resort than a hospital. 30 days after Chris checked in, I sat in the family meeting room, waiting. My hands fidgeted with Mum's diary. I'd brought it on impulse, though I wasn't sure why. The door opened. Chris looked different, clearer somehow. The haunted look in his eyes had softened. Jules, he hesitated before sitting across from me. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you'd stay. Yeah, he smiled slightly. Me neither. Have you heard from Dad? The sentencing is next week. His lawyer thinks he'll get 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. Chris nodded, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. I wrote him a letter. Part of the program, you know. Making amends. Did he respond? Yeah. Said he was proud of me, finally. First time he's ever said that when I wasn't lying about something. A counselor poked her head in. Ready for the family session? We moved to a larger room where a woman with kind eyes and grey hair sat waiting. Her nameplate read, Dr. Sarah. Chris has made remarkable progress, she began. But recovery isn't just about the addict. It's about healing the whole family system. Our family system is pretty broken, I said. Tell her about the diary, Chris urged suddenly. I pulled it out. Our mom's. She left when we were kids. I found it recently. Dr. Sarah leaned forward. And what did you learn from it? That she was braver than we knew. I opened to a marked page. She wrote about seeing the patterns, how addiction spreads through families like a virus. Not just the gambling, but the enabling, the lies, the shame. Jules, Chris's voice cracked. Read the part about me, please. I found the entry he meant. My sweet boy thinks money equals love. Every time we bail him out, we're teaching him that his worth is measured in dollars and debts. I can't watch him learn this lesson anymore. She tried to save me, Chris whispered. Back then, but I chose Dad's way instead. The way of secrets and quick fixes. And now? Dr. Sarah asked. Now I'm choosing her way, the hard way, the truth. The counselor nodded approvingly. Julia, your article exposure. Chris tells me it was you who contacted the journalist. Yes. How do you feel about that decision now? I looked at Chris. Honestly? Some days I feel guilty. Dad's going to prison. Our family's reputation is destroyed. Chris could have... Died? Chris finished. I was heading there anyway, Jules. The exposure just sped up the inevitable crash. "Tell me about your mother," Dr. Sarah said. "What would she think of all this?" I opened the diary to the last entry. "My biggest regret is not fighting harder for the truth, not standing firm when the lies threaten to drown us all. My children deserve better than a legacy of secrets." "She'd be proud of you," Chris said quietly. "You did what she couldn't. You broke the cycle." Dr. Sarah smiled. "Chris has something to share with you, Julia." Chris pulled out a folded paper. "I got a job, nothing fancy, maintenance work at a small hotel, but it's honest work, real work." That's amazing, Chris." "There's more." He took a deep breath. "I'm selling Dad's house." He agreed. "It'll cover most of my debts. The rest, well, I'll be paying it off for years, but at least it'll be honest debt repayment." Tears pricked my eyes. "Mum would be proud of you too. One day at a time," he said, echoing what must have been a rehab mantra. "Speaking of which," he pulled out another paper. "I found Mum's grave, in Oregon. I thought maybe, when I'm stronger, we could visit together," I finished. Dr. Sarah cleared her throat. "Chris, why don't you share your insight about the gambling?" "Right." He straightened up. "I finally figured it out. It was never about the money. It was about feeling worthy. Every win made me feel like the son Dad wanted. Every loss made me need that feeling more desperately. And now I'm learning to be worthy just by being honest, by doing the work, by facing the truth." The session wrapped up, and as we walked to the parking lot, Chris stopped me. "Jules, thank you for not giving up on me, for giving up on enabling me instead." I hugged him, our first real hug in years. "One day at a time, right?" "Right." He touched Mum's diary. "Keep it safe. Maybe someday we can read it together. Really understand her." "I'd like that." As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Pearl. "Following up on your story, dozens of families have reached out. Would you and Chris consider sharing your recovery journey?" I thought about Mom's last diary entry, about fighting for the truth, about breaking cycles. "Let me talk to Chris," I texted back, "but I think we're ready to tell the whole story now. The hard parts, the healing parts, all of it. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free, sometimes it brings you home." The autumn wind whipped around us as Chris and I stood before Mom's simple headstone. The Oregon cemetery was quiet except for rustling leaves and distant wind chimes. "Should we read it?" Chris held Mom's diary, his 6-month sobriety chip catching the sunlight as he moved. "You start." He opened to a random page. Today, Chris won his baseball game. His smile lit up the field. I wish I could freeze him in this moment, before the darkness of our family's legacy touches him. I placed the white roses we'd brought beside the stone. She knew, even then. "Julia." Chris's voice was hesitant. "Pearl's article about my recovery journey comes out tomorrow. Having second thoughts?" "No. Just, Dad wrote to me from prison, said going public with my addiction story would be the final nail in our family's reputation coffin." I laughed softly, still trying to control the narrative, even from behind bars. I wrote back, told him I'm done hiding. Chris touched the headstone. Mom would understand. My phone buzzed, a text from Zoe. "Support group all set up for tonight, 15 families confirmed." After Pearl's follow-up article about Chris's recovery went viral, we'd started a support group for families dealing with gambling addiction. Tonight would be our first meeting. "Ready to head back?" I asked Chris. "Wait." He pulled out a letter. I wrote this. "To Mom. Part of the 12 steps, but it feels right to read it here." The paper shook in his hands as he began. "Dear Mom, I understand now why you left. I blamed you for years, but you were the only one brave enough to break free. I'm sorry I chose Dad's way of lies over your truth. I'm sorry I made Julia carry the burden of my addiction. But mostly, I'm sorry I wasted so many years being the son Dad wanted instead of the son you knew I could be." Tears streaked down his face. I squeezed his hand. "The thing is, Mom," he continued, Julia did what you couldn't. She forced us all to face the truth. Dad's in prison, facing his crimes. I'm sober, facing my demons. And tonight, we're starting a support group to help other families break free from the cycle of addiction and enabling. A gust of wind scattered leaves across Mum's grave. Your diary saved us, Chris finished. Your words gave Julia the strength to expose our secrets, gave me the courage to get help. We're not hiding anymore, Mum. We're healing. I hope you can see that. He folded the letter and tucked it under the roses. Jules, he turned to me, what you did, exposing everything, it was the most loving thing anyone's ever done for me, even if I hated you for it at first. Love isn't always gentle, I said, remembering Mum's words. Sometimes it's fierce. Sometimes it burns everything down so something new can grow. Speaking of new things, Chris pulled out a brochure. The counseling certification program accepted me. Once I hit my 1-year sobriety mark, I can start training to help other gambling addicts. Pride swelled in my chest. Mum would love that. Think we should head to the meeting, share her story with the group? I picked up the diary. I think that's exactly what she would want. As we walked back to the car, Chris stopped suddenly. You know what I realized? All those years, Dad taught us that family means protecting each other's secrets. But Mom knew the truth. What's that? Real family means protecting each other from secrets. At the community center that evening, I watched Chris share his story with a room full of people fighting their own battles with addiction and enabling. He spoke about Mum's courage, Dad's failures, my tough love, and his own journey to recovery. I opened Mum's diary one last time, reading her final entry silently. My dearest children, if you're reading this, you've finally found your way to the truth. Remember, our legacy isn't in the secrets we keep, but in the courage we find to break free from them. Love isn't measured in silence or sacrifice, but in the strength to speak up, to stand firm, to save each other from the comfortable lies that destroy us. I hope someday you'll understand why I left. More importantly, I hope you'll find the courage to stay and fight for something better. Looking around the room at all the families beginning their own journeys to truth and healing, I knew we'd finally found that courage. Mum's diary wasn't just a record of our past, it was a roadmap to our future, a future built on truth, no matter how difficult, on love, no matter how fierce. We were finally becoming the family she always knew we could be.
At 15, I've always felt like the outsider in my own family, especially compared to my 14-year-old adopted brother, Oliver. Adopted when he was just 5, Oliver somehow fits in more easily than I ever have. My parents often joke about how much he resembles them, saying he's more the ideal child, though meant to be light-hearted. Their comments always sting. To the outside world, we might look like a picture-perfect family, the kind you'd see on magazine covers, with our conventional beauty, yet I've never felt like I fit that mold. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes as a child, and managing my weight has been a lifelong struggle. My parents were strict about what I ate, which only made me sneak food in secret, feeling deprived rather than cared for. 5 months ago, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which has made life even more challenging. Some days, the pain is so severe that I need a wheelchair, and that's been a difficult adjustment, both physically and emotionally. Already an introvert, I've retreated even further into my room, not wanting to burden anyone. I'm deeply lonely but resigned to not asking for too much from those around me. One of the few traditions I still looked forward to was our annual family Christmas photo. Despite everything, I still wanted to be part of that, to feel included. But this year, as I dressed up and prepared to join, my parents awkwardly told me they thought it would be better if the photo was just of them and Oliver. They said my wheelchair would spoil the picture. Hurt, I offered to stand for a few shots, but they declined, making it clear they didn't want me there at all. Devastated, I went back to my room and cried, with no one even bothering to check on me. That moment broke me, and I called my grandmother. She's always been a source of strength for me, someone who rebuilt her life after being widowed young. She listened patiently as I poured my heart out, then took swift action, changing her will and making her support for me known in a way that shocked my parents. It was a wake-up call. highlighting the deep fractures in our family dynamic. While my parents were upset, I had already come to terms with the fact that their love for me had conditions attached, unlike my grandmother's unconditional support. My grandmother had always offered me the option of living with her, but I had hesitated, clinging to the hope that my parents would one day treat me better. That Christmas, though, I finally realized it wasn't going to happen. My presence in this family wasn't really wanted, it was tolerated at best. The pain of being excluded from something as simple as a family photo was overwhelming, but my grandmother's unwavering love gave me the strength to see the truth. When I called her, sobbing and feeling more alone than ever, she promised she'd take me with her as soon as she got back from her cruise. Her life was so different from mine, full of friends, laughter, and adventure, while I spent my days in silence, confined to my room. In the days before her return, nothing changed at home. My parents and Oliver acted like everything was fine, as if they hadn't just pushed me further into isolation. When my grandmother finally arrived, I was the one who greeted her at the door. My parents were clueless about what was coming. They greeted her as if everything was normal, not knowing that I had told her everything. When she confronted them about excluding me from the photo, they were stunned, unsure how she knew. Instead of apologizing, they doubled down on their excuse, claiming they didn't want to inconvenience me by asking me to stand or include my wheelchair in the shot. I couldn't hold back any longer. I told them exactly how I felt, that their excuses were just a cover for their discomfort with me. I pointed out how differently they treated Oliver, how he, despite being adopted, was embraced as their own while I, their biological daughter, was left on the outside. Oliver couldn't meet my eyes, maybe out of guilt or acknowledgement of the truth. My parents, though, accused me of being overdramatic, telling me I was spoiled for feeling this way. They couldn't see that their actions weren't just hurtful, they were damaging my sense of belonging. As painful as it was, standing up for myself was liberating. With my grandmother there, I realized I didn't have to stay in a place where I wasn't valued. I deserved to be somewhere I was truly loved, and with her, I knew I would find that. I was ready to leave, not just the house, but the conditional love that had defined my life there. My grandmother had always offered me a safe haven, and I was finally ready to accept it. I knew with her, I could start fresh, in a place where I truly belonged. Now that we've begun to reconnect, things between my brother and me are gradually improving. My conversation with my grandmother opened my eyes to many things, including how Oliver had been influenced by our parents' behavior toward me. Without fully realizing it, he had mirrored their actions, not understanding the harm it caused, but his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and reach out meant a lot. At home, just as I was preparing to stand up for myself, my grandmother stepped in, making it clear she was there to put an end to the mistreatment I had endured for so long. My parents looked bewildered when she announced that I would be going to live with her. They had always made me feel like a burden, and now they didn't even try to stop her. It was a painful validation of what I had always felt, that they didn't truly want me to be part of their lives. The silence after her declaration hung heavily in the air. When she revealed her plan to take me away, my parents seemed indifferent at first, but everything changed when she said she was cutting them out of her will. The mention of inheritance shattered their calm facade, and suddenly they were scrambling, trying to justify themselves and defend their behavior, revealing just how materialistic their motives were. My grandmother, having built a successful grocery business, had amassed significant wealth. Though I had never cared about that, I loved her for who she was, not for what she had. But my parents, their sudden desperation made their priorities clear. My grandmother held up the revised documents, explaining that everything would now go to Oliver and me. The drama intensified as my parents begged and bargained, but my grandmother remained firm, unmoved by their sudden show of emotion. She told me to pack my things and be ready to leave with her immediately. I was more than ready. I knew in my heart that living with her would be healthier, more peaceful. As I packed, my parents' pleas continued, but Oliver was the only one who seemed genuinely affected by my leaving. When we finally drove away, it was a strange mix of liberation and sadness. I was leaving behind so much pain, yet I was also stepping into a new chapter of my life, a chapter filled with my grandmother's love and support. Living with her brought a peace I hadn't known before. Being closer to school meant more rest and less stress, and with every day, I felt myself healing a little more. Not long after I left, Oliver reached out with a heartfelt message. He apologized for his past behavior, acknowledging how much he valued our family and my constant acceptance of him as my brother. Even when our parents hadn't treated me the same, he was eager to rebuild our bond. and we started by spending more time together at school. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The truth had been painful, but it also set me free. Now, with my grandmother's unwavering support and the mending of my relationship with Oliver, I finally felt like I was part of a family that truly cared for me. During one of our recent hangouts, Oliver confided something that weighed heavily on me. We were chatting casually, but when I asked how things were at home, he revealed that tensions were running high between our parents. Apparently, they had been locked in a cycle of blaming each other ever since I left. My mom had accused my dad of being the reason for so long. I felt pushed away, particularly when my dad suggested I be excluded from the family Christmas photo. My parents didn't see how painful that was for me. My dad claims it was my mom's overreaction that fueled most of the tension, often making it seem like raising me was the hardest challenge she had ever faced. During a casual conversation, Oliver mentioned that he was worried they might get divorced, given the growing strain in their relationship. His comment, though said in passing, has stayed with me, leaving me feeling unsettled. It's irrational, but part of me can't shake the feeling that if they do divorce, it would somehow be my fault. Maybe I overreacted about the photo incident, and perhaps they didn't mean to make me feel like a burden. These thoughts have been hard to shake, and I've found myself in a loop of self-blame and regret, even though I know their marital problems aren't my responsibility. Still, I can't help but feel like I'm being overly sensitive, but it's been weighing on my mind. That's why I'm turning to this community, to get some objective reassurance and clarity. For those curious, my grandmother recently revised her will to leave everything to Oliver and me because of how poorly my parents treated me. Oliver wasn't involved in any of the negative behavior, and given his age, both my grandmother and I believe he deserves a chance to learn and grow. Pushing him away because of our parents' actions wouldn't be fair, it would make us no better than them. Some have asked about Oliver's background. His biological mother was just 17 when she had him, and she had to drop out of college due to the pregnancy and her struggles with substance abuse. His father was mostly absent, only making occasional appearances. His maternal grandparents tried multiple times to help their daughter get her life together, but eventually, they encouraged her to consider adoption when Oliver was 7, believing it would give him a better future. My parents had already been exploring adoption because of complications from my mom's first pregnancy, and they learned about Oliver through a family connection. They fostered him before officially adopting him. Oliver still sees his biological grandparents monthly, but he's had no contact with his parents since the adoption. His mother finds it too painful to be around him, and his father completely disappeared from his life. Navigating these family dynamics has been tough, but opening up about them here is helping me process everything and hopefully find support from people who've gone through similar experiences. When my parents apologized recently, it felt more about their image than a genuine attempt to repair the relationship. It seemed like they wanted to smooth things over before I left for college, without addressing the deep-rooted issues. I regret some of the things I said during heated arguments in the past, especially about Oliver being adopted. I've since apologized to him because he means the world to me, and I never wanted him to feel like he wasn't truly part of our family. Despite everything, I've always seen him as my brother. The bond we share is something I'm determined to strengthen, despite the rough patches caused by our parents. We've both been through a lot, and I refuse to let our parents' behavior create a wedge between us anymore. I even told Oliver that if things at home ever became unbearable, he could come live with me and our grandmother. I'm not trying to pull him away from our parents, but I want him to know he has a safe and peaceful place to go if he needs it. The support I've received from this community has been overwhelming, and it's reassuring to know I'm not alone in this. When I confided in my grandmother about my fears of being responsible for my parents' problems, she firmly reminded me that none of this was my fault. She pointed out that their frustrations with each other had always been there, but now that I wasn't around as their target, they were directing it at each other. If they do end up divorcing, it's not because I stood up for myself, it's because they can't manage their own issues. Oliver reassured me too. When he mentioned their potential divorce, he wasn't trying to make me feel guilty, he was just answering my question. Recently, my parents showed up unannounced to talk about our strained relationship. They'd taken time off work to see me, but I wasn't in the right headspace that day. They said they wanted to spend time with me before I left for college and offered a half-hearted apology, saying they were sorry. I felt offended. Instead of admitting that their actions had genuinely hurt me, their words felt dismissive, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. I suggested they send their thoughts in an email or come back another time when I was better prepared to talk. I needed space to process everything. and rushing into a conversation wasn't going to fix anything meaningful. It might seem like I was avoiding the issue, but stepping back was necessary to manage the situation on my own terms, especially considering the emotional toll their past behavior had taken on me. Oliver understands why I made that choice and supports my decision to handle things this way. We've promised each other not to let family disputes come between us. No matter what happens with our parents, our commitment is to stay close and supportive of one another, ensuring that the challenges we face don't undermine the trust and love we've worked hard to rebuild. This approach is about protecting our well-being and making sure that, regardless of what happens in our family, our relationship remains strong and intact. After several difficult interactions, it's clear that my parents aren't really focused on understanding me or fixing their past mistakes. During a recent conversation, I tried explaining that my feelings of hurt came from their actions, but instead of acknowledging that, they shifted the blame. They insisted that my distance was the reason they didn't realize I was struggling. It only confirmed what I already suspected. They were more interested in deflecting responsibility than offering a genuine apology. Frustrated and realizing that this cycle of blame was going nowhere, I asked them to leave. They resisted, saying we needed to have a full conversation, as if just talking would magically fix everything. They seemed to believe that because they had provided for me in the past, which were really just the basic responsibilities of being parents, they deserved my engagement. I couldn't continue without getting more upset, so I decided to retreat to my room. But then my dad escalated things by demanding I stay and finish the conversation. Thankfully, my grandmother stepped in. She calmly but firmly told him that raising his voice wasn't acceptable in her home, especially after the way they had treated me. She made it clear that if I chose not to engage, they had to respect that decision and leave. That moment was an eye-opener for all of us. It made me see more clearly than ever that their main concern wasn't really about making amends or our well-being. They were more worried about how it would look to others, about what people might think if they found out I was living with my grandmother. But I was done caring about their need to preserve appearances. I was focused on my future and my healing. After they left, my grandmother and I talked about whether I wanted to see them again anytime soon. And right now, my answer is a solid no. She supported my decision, promising me that she wouldn't let them drop by uninvited again. I also talked to Oliver about their visit. He was surprised by their behavior and said things had been tense at home since their return. I feel for him, but I know I need to maintain my distance for my own mental health. In a week, I'll be heading off to college, and I've already been accepted into my first-choice school. My grandmother has been amazing. She's arranged everything for my move and even plans to stay with me for the first couple of weeks to help me settle into my new apartment. It's a huge step, living on my own, but I feel ready and excited for what's ahead. Without the constant stress of dealing with my parents, my mental health has improved significantly. Oliver and I have agreed to keep in touch regularly, weekly FaceTime chats at the very least. While it's bittersweet leaving the security and comfort of my grandmother's home, I'm genuinely excited about this new chapter. The future feels bright, and I'm ready for it. When I turned 18, life took a sharp and unexpected turn. My parents and twin sister decided there wasn't enough room for me in our home, effectively pushing me out. For the next several years, I struggled with instability, bouncing between makeshift living arrangements, including even living in a tent, and doing whatever it took to survive. Despite these challenges, I managed to build a stable life for myself and eventually bought my own house. Now, at 26, just as I've found my footing, my family, led by my sister, who is pregnant with her fourth child, has suddenly reappeared. They showed up unannounced, expecting to move in. This is the same sister who had advocated for my removal from our family home, claiming it was too small for both of us. Throughout my childhood, I always felt overshadowed by my sister. My parents were open about their favoritism toward her, even admitting they wouldn't have had me if it weren't for her conception. She was always their priority, her needs taking precedence over mine, from toys to clothes, while I received just enough to keep up appearances. My sister has always exhibited narcissistic tendencies, likely nurtured by our parents' biased treatment. She was a constant source of emotional turmoil, undermining me at every opportunity instead of offering the support one might expect from a sibling. The only family member who saw the injustice was our grandfather, who treated me with kindness. His passing when I was 15 marked the end of any warmth in my family life. As teenagers, when my sister became pregnant, Our parents arranged for her to marry her boyfriend and brought him into our already overcrowded home. I didn't even have a couch to sleep on, as my father often used it, with no space left for me and strict instructions not to reach out to extended family, lest I expose the dysfunctional reality of our household. I was completely cast out. At one point, I lived in a tent in our backyard, a situation that arose after the police returned me home following a brief period of homelessness. My parents allowed it as a reward for keeping quiet about the truth of our family life. Years of hardship followed, but my determination led me to build a better life for myself, both emotionally and materially. Now, with my family attempting to encroach on the life I've fought so hard to create, I find myself at a crossroads. They offered me a place to stay in their backyard if I cleaned it up first. I accepted, despite the mess, flour, sugar, and debris scattered everywhere, along with a rodent infestation. I was at my lowest, and even though my sister seemed relieved to see me leave, remarking about the lack of space, no one cared enough to ask where I was going. Cleaning up the area and dealing with the rodents was a tough task, but I eventually made the space livable. Though I dropped out of high school just months before graduation, I found purpose in my job and soon realized I needed to enhance my skills to secure a better future. Growing up, I often helped my father, a service technician, with repairs, and this experience came in handy. I pursued further education and landed a job at a car manufacturing plant. Through hard work and dedication, I worked my way up to becoming a design manager. Now, as my past tries to resurface, I am prepared to confront it and protect the life I've built. Recently, an old friend, going through a divorce, needed to sell his house quickly. Although I hesitated at first, the significant discount and flexible payment terms he offered made it an opportunity one couldn't pass up. So, I purchased the 4-bedroom house and moved in 3 weeks ago. To my surprise, my estranged family showed up unannounced at my new home. Given that we hadn't spoken in years and I lived 17 miles away, their visit caught me off guard. I suspect a neighbor, still connected to me on social media, might have tipped them off. Upon barging in, my parents expressed pride in my accomplishments. It was surreal to see them acting impressed with me being a homeowner at 36, while they still rented. My sister and her husband wandered through the house as if they were inspecting it for themselves, and when I confronted them, they claimed they were just checking on me. Suddenly, my family, who had been absent for years, seemed interested in my life, just when I needed them least. During the visit, my sister brazenly claimed one of the bedrooms, excited about the attached private bathroom, as though it was already decided she'd be moving in. My parents half-heartedly attempted to tell her to manage her kids better, but the whole situation was absurd. I was stunned by their boldness and firmly rejected any discussions about them staying with me. The conversation escalated quickly. They tried to guilt-trip me, insisting it was my family duty to house my sister and her children. In a moment of frustration, I made it clear that it was my parents' responsibility to provide for their children, not mine. I demanded they leave, reinforcing that I had built my life independently and wasn't obligated to solve their lack of planning or space. As they finally left, I felt a wave of relief, knowing that I had asserted my independence and protected my peace. I had spent years yearning for family support that never came, and now, ironically, they appeared when I had no need for them. Years ago, my grandfather had been fine with letting my cousin sleep on the couch, but when I asked for the same favor, he refused and kicked me out. I vented my frustrations to my family, recounting how I had lived with rodents in my employer's garage, and then in a cramped apartment for 10 long years, all while they never checked on me once. As I spoke, my mother began to cry, trying to hug me, but I stopped her, insisting they leave. Jayan, my sister's husband, told me to toughen up, recounting his own hardships and implying I had more than enough space since I was single. His comment enraged me, and I sharply told him to be quiet. My sister cursed at me for speaking to her husband that way, but I stood firm and made it clear that if they didn't leave, things would escalate. I ushered them out, shutting down any further arguments. My anger was intense. They had always been toxic and self-serving, and now their greed was on full display. As the door closed behind them, I stood in my own space, relieved, free at last from the burden of their uninvited expectations. I savored the peace I had worked so hard to create. I was no longer the compliant teenager they once manipulated. If they pushed me further, I was prepared to involve the police. No, my sister had never once offered to pay rent. She and her husband had been living off my parents for over a decade, and now it seemed like they were trying to shift that burden onto me. Despite the clear strain on my parents, they never pushed her out, instead hoping I would take her off their hands. A week after our first confrontation, my mother came by again. This time, she was more direct. She argued that my house had enough space to accommodate my sister and her family. She repeated the same points about her place being too crowded, but I held firm. When persuasion didn't work, she moved to subtle threats, implying that having family around would make my home safer and help with upkeep. I saw right through her manipulations and told her to leave, making it clear she wasn't welcome back if she continued. Not long after, a neighbor informed me of suspicious activity near my house. He said he saw a pregnant woman, a man, and a young boy looking into my windows and lingering around the backyard, possibly trying to break in. I thanked him for his vigilance, gave him my contact details, and planned to install security cameras as soon as possible. But it wasn't soon enough. Just 5 days later, that same neighbor called again, telling me he thought someone had broken into my home. When I rushed back, I found that he was right. My sister and her husband, John, had broken in through a back window. Confronting them, my sister claimed they had no other choice and accused me of being unreasonable. John, with a smug grin, commented on how easy it was to break in. Furious, I lost my temper and got into a physical altercation with him. As my sister tried to intervene, their teenage son hit me over the head with a bottle, causing a gash that bled profusely. Everything descended into chaos. My sister immediately called our parents, telling them I had attacked them. When the police arrived, my sister and John frantically apologized, begging the officers not to arrest their son, but I was determined to press charges. My sister, however, denied the break-in, saying they were just visiting and their son's actions were a harmless prank. When my parents arrived, they tried to pressure me into dropping the charges, defending my sister and twisting the situation to make me look vindictive, but I wasn't about to let them rewrite what had happened in my own home. Thankfully, my neighbor stepped in with a statement that confirmed the break-in and assault, leading to the arrests. They spent the night in jail because my parents couldn't afford to post bail. The next morning, they faced trial while I was in the hospital, treating my head injury and making sure there were no serious complications. I took time off work to recover and pressed charges for assault, as well as seeking compensation for my legal fees, which the court awarded. My parents continued to beg me to drop the charges, but I stood my ground, even warning them that I'd take legal action if they kept interfering. Since their son is a minor, he was handled under juvenile law, spending time in a facility while his parents were held liable for restitution, covering my lost wages and medical expenses. My sister and John were hit with hefty fines. To ease their financial burden, they asked if part of the fine could be swapped for community service. Things have been quiet since then. I hope they've finally learned their lesson and stay out of my life. However, my parents haven't let it go. Just the other day, they showed up at my door. After waiting outside for over an hour, I reluctantly let them in, only to find they were asking me to help my sister again. I refused outright. Then they revealed their true motive. They're getting older, their home is falling apart, and they wanted to move in with me, expecting me to take care of them. When I confronted them about how they've handled their responsibilities as parents, they mentioned their plan to give their house to my sister. They even suggested that I let her live with me and pay rent to help with my mortgage. I told them I wouldn't be manipulated again and showed them the door. I stood my ground, telling them firmly that my sister's financial problems were hers to solve, not mine. As they continued to plead, insisting the house was too big for just one person, I made it clear that my future wouldn't involve staying single or taking them in out of obligation. Their attempts at emotional manipulation fell flat. I reminded them of how they had treated me in the past, refusing to let guilt steer me into compliance. It was obvious they were trying to exploit our family ties for their own benefit, but I held fast to my boundaries, knowing I needed to protect my well-being and my future. After they left, visibly upset, I closed the door behind them, regardless of what names they might throw at me. I was determined not to cave to their demands or let them trample over me again. Now, with that chapter behind me, I turned my attention to yet another challenge in my life. After 5 years of silence, my father reached out to me, prompting a flood of memories about our last encounter when I was 26. Not long after I graduated from college, he abruptly kicked me out of the house, This shocking decision came on the heels of accusations from my stepmother and stepsister, who claimed I had stolen money from my stepsister's college fund. It was the breaking point of mounting tension that had been simmering since my father remarried. My parents divorced when I was 7, and by age 15, my dad had started dating Ellie, my future stepmother. Ellie was a widow with a daughter, Sophia, who was 4 years my junior. From the very first meeting, I could feel Ellie and Sophia's reluctance to welcome me into their lives, a sentiment that only intensified over time. Although I moved out for college, my infrequent visits home were rife with discomfort, as their coldness became increasingly evident. My father, however, was blind to their animosity, convinced they held no ill will towards me, which only widened the chasm between us. After graduating, I returned home with plans to save for my own place, hoping to address the palpable hostility I felt. Unfortunately, my father brushed off my concerns, certain of Ellie and Sophia's affection for me. But it quickly became clear that their disdain was all too real. Tensions escalated when Ellie and Sophia accused me of something grave. After a long day of searching for a new place to escape the toxic atmosphere at home, I returned to find my father visibly upset. He immediately ordered me to leave, convinced I had stolen from Sophia's college fund. Ellie echoed his accusations passionately, falsely claiming I had misused access to a financial account designated for emergencies. Reeling from the confusion and hurt, I was forced to leave without my side of the story being heard. This rupture ended our relationship, and I lost all contact with him. Now, years later, my father's unexpected outreach has resurfaced those old wounds, making me question my past actions and whether I handled everything as well as I could have. I never understood why Ellie accused me of misappropriating funds meant for her daughter. She alleged that I had used money set aside for Sophia to indulge in an extravagant shopping spree, an assertion that was completely untrue. Yet she managed to convince my father by planting the purchased items in my room. My protests were ignored. By the time I suggested verifying the accusations with the bank, my father had already sided with Ellie, having found the items under my bed. When I insisted on clearing my name, he dismissed me, fully convinced of my guilt and labeling me a thief. Heartbroken and wronged, I moved out, cut ties with him, and struggled financially for a time. But eventually, I regained my footing, built a comfortable life, and even began planning to buy a house. For 5 years, I kept my distance from my father's family, relying on my mother for support, as she too had severed ties with him due to his treatment of me. Then, out of the blue, my father appeared at my door, seeking forgiveness. He had finally learned the truth. Ellie had fabricated the entire situation to mask her own misuse of funds meant for her daughter's education. She had splurged on lavish items for herself and Sophia, then set me up to deflect scrutiny from her spending habits. After a recent argument with her parents, they had revealed everything to my father, exposing Ellie's manipulation. Now, understanding the full extent of her deceit, he was asking for a chance to mend our relationship. It turned out that Ellie had used me as a pawn in her scheme to secure her financial future while shielding her own extravagances. My father confided that he had filed for divorce from Ellie a few weeks prior. With help from his old attorney, he now sought to reconcile with me. During our conversation, he mentioned that he knew one of my friend's fathers was a respected divorce attorney and hoped I could facilitate a connection to negotiate a lower fee since Ellie and her lawyer had crafted a biased divorce petition. He seemed to think that an apology might suffice, as if we could simply return to the way things were before. The audacity of his request left me speechless, and I couldn't help but laugh before firmly shutting the door in his face. The notion that he could expect my help after everything was absurd. If he needed legal assistance, he should reach out himself and pay the standard fees like anyone else. His current lawyer's reluctance to handle the complicated divorce was not my burden to bear. After closing the door, I warned him to leave or I'd call the police. I thought that would be the end of it, but then my mother called, unexpectedly criticizing my decision not to help him. She argued that everyone makes mistakes, including my father, and insisted it wasn't fair to hold him to a higher standard simply because he was my dad. While I recognized that everyone makes mistakes, my feelings ran deeper. They stemmed from my father's choice to trust Ellie over me, his own daughter, and the hurtful words he had thrown at me when he forced me out of our home. He hadn't come just to apologize. He was seeking my help as well. I couldn't shake the feeling that if he hadn't needed something, I wouldn't have heard from him at all. After 5 long years, he had finally acknowledged his mistake, but now he was back not only to seek forgiveness but also to ask for a favor. I tried to explain to my mother that my reluctance wasn't merely about his past misdeeds. It was about the deep emotional pain caused by his decision to prioritize Ellie over me. She insisted that his admission, even if belated, should mean something, urging me to be the bigger person and forgive him. While I was close to my friend and likely could ask him about his father's availability for my dad's case, I found myself torn. The emotional toll of reconnecting under these circumstances felt overwhelming, and I wasn't sure I could simply brush aside the past. Despite the expectation to extend help, I found myself embroiled in a heated debate with my mother about whether I should assist my estranged father in securing a lower rate from a top divorce attorney. The best lawyers are costly, and I wasn't even confident I could persuade anyone to lower their fees. My mother failed to see my perspective, and I struggled to understand hers, which felt utterly illogical to me. Our argument left us both frustrated and not speaking, leading me to question my own decisions. As I reflected on the situation, I wasn't sure if refusing to help my father was wrong, but my mother's reaction suggested otherwise. I felt torn, wondering if I had made a mistake in standing my ground. After some contemplation and considering the opinions of others, I decided to distance myself from both my parents. I realized I owed my father nothing, especially since his apology came only after he discovered the truth, indicating that he likely wouldn't have reached out if he hadn't needed something from me. As for my mother, I was baffled by her sudden support for my father after years of estrangement. During our last conversation, she mentioned that he had reached out to her in tears, trying to reconnect, which was unusual for him, as he rarely showed his emotions. This was enough for her to listen to him, leading to her finding out about his attempt to apologize to me. Yet she claimed they hadn't spoken in the last 5 years, a statement I found hard to believe. This entire situation made me realize that my mother might not understand me as well as I had thought. If she truly knew me, she wouldn't have expected me to forgive my father so easily. For now, I resolved to maintain my distance from both my parents. Avoiding my father had been surprisingly easy. Since I had distanced myself from my father for 5 years, stepping back from my mother would be much more challenging. She had been my main family connection during that time, and losing that bond was painful. I decided to give her a week to reflect and potentially apologize for her reaction. If she didn't come around, I would have to accept that my relationship with her might also become a casualty in this ongoing family conflict. It was a tough situation, but I needed to prioritize my emotional well-being and move forward with or without their understanding. Before the week was up, my mom reached out, not with an apology, but with a request to meet and talk things through in person, holding on to hope for reconciliation. I agreed. When she arrived, she began by admitting that she might not have fully grasped my perspective during our last discussion. Encouraged, I reiterated my feelings, hoping this would pave the way for her to apologize so we could finally put this behind us. However, instead of offering an apology, she suggested I have the same discussion with my father. She believed that if I could explain my side calmly, it might help mend our relationship. She reminded me that despite his mistakes, believing I had misused Ellie's money, he had protected me from legal consequences, which, in her view, showed he still cared. She insisted I should at least offer him an explanation, emphasizing that I was raised to be kind and understanding. Disheartened, I told her she didn't know me as well as she thought. I felt no obligation to forgive or explain anything to my father. Considering his past actions, it hurt that she hadn't acknowledged her part in this, and I made it clear that I would only continue the conversation if she was ready to genuinely apologize. As our discussion grew more tense, she became visibly anxious and admitted she couldn't leave without fulfilling a promise to my father to persuade me to talk to him. She pleaded with me, saying that family should be there to forgive one another and that it would be tragic to live otherwise. I dismissed this as empty rhetoric and asked her to leave, frustrated that her visit was more about keeping her promise to my father than genuinely repairing our relationship. In that moment, she finally expressed regret, perhaps realizing too late that her approach might cost her our relationship. Her apology seemed tied to her obligations to my father rather than a sincere understanding of my feelings, adding another layer of complexity to our already turbulent family dynamics. I felt deeply betrayed by both my parents, yet a part of me grappled with the thought that as my parents, perhaps I should find a way to forgive them. After all, they had done many things right in the past, and that should count for something. But when my mother tried to use this reasoning to justify her actions, it struck me as absurd. I confronted her about the promises she made to my father, stressing that it wasn't my responsibility to help her fulfill those commitments. Our conversation escalated when she revealed that she couldn't leave because my father was waiting for her in the car, hoping to be invited inside. This revelation was the last straw. I had made it clear that I didn't want to meet him, yet she had disregarded my wishes, thinking she could persuade me otherwise. My frustration boiled over into anger, and I yelled at her, calling her a terrible mother and declaring that I was done with her. Despite her tears and apologies, I was resolute. The argument dragged on for about 15 minutes before she finally left, and as she did, I warned her that any further visits from her or my father would compel me to call the police. After she left, I even contemplated speaking to a lawyer about obtaining a protective order against them. Just when I thought the day couldn't get any more chaotic, another unexpected event unfolded. I was enjoying a rare day off at home, planning a quiet day, when Ellie and her daughter, Sophia, appeared at my doorstep. Initially, I considered sending them away immediately and even started to dial the police, but Ellie quickly intervened, insisting she wasn't there to cause trouble. Rather, she wanted to reveal some truths about my father and explain why my mother had suddenly sided with him after years of silence. Her presence was as unpleasant as ever, and I had no desire to hear her out at first. However, something Ellie mentioned about my mother caught me off guard and piqued my curiosity. Reluctantly, I listened as she stood outside, refusing to enter my house. Ellie shared that a couple of weeks ago, her parents had revealed critical information about the incident from 5 years ago, sparking a series of unexpected revelations and confrontations. This twist was surprising. I hadn't anticipated Ellie, of all people, coming forward with information that could shed light on the recent tensions within my family. Her news complicated my understanding of our family dynamics. Ellie explained that she had stopped sending money to her parents because my father was no longer providing the financial support she desired. Greed had taken over, and when the funds dwindled, she began investigating. Her snooping led to a shocking discovery. My dad was having an affair with my mother and was allegedly stashing money away to leave Ellie. Determined not to be left empty-handed, Ellie decided to stay with him, planning to initiate the divorce on her own terms. Eventually, my father uncovered her plan, leading to a massive fight that revealed their true motives. Under normal circumstances, he could have divorced Ellie without much consequence, but his own infidelity complicated matters. Ellie hadn't worked in 10 years and had crafted a divorce petition that favored her, which my dad contested fiercely. She told me all this because my father had recently threatened her during a phone call, warning her that I was supposed to connect him with a top divorce attorney, putting her in a vulnerable position. He was bluffing, but Ellie, fearing the worst, decided to spill everything. I was stunned by her revelations. They explained my mother's odd behavior and sudden alliance with my father. After sharing her story, Ellie left it up to me to decide whether I wanted to assist my dad or not. For once, Ellie had actually been useful to me, and I found myself oddly grateful for her honesty. Yet this was the final straw with my parents. I couldn't believe my mother had tried to manipulate me into giving my father another chance for her own selfish reasons. It was clear that my parents were suited for each other, and I was better off without them in my life. Living on my own, I genuinely enjoyed the peace. Occasionally, I missed my mother, but I quickly reminded myself of her betrayal, which made it easier to cope with her absence. I've heard through relatives that my dad and mom are back together and that his divorce from Ellie was finalized a few weeks ago. There's a wedding planned soon, and although I've been informed about it in case I wanted to reconcile, I have no interest in attending or mending things with them. Life on my own has been fulfilling and peaceful, and I'm content with where I am, far removed from the drama and manipulation that once consumed my life. For 9 months, my mother-in-law, Harper, relentlessly compared my pregnancy to my sister-in-law's perfect experience. When my sister-in-law eventually had her baby, both she and my husband made the decision to cut ties with Harper. My husband and I have been happily married for over 4 years, and together for 7. He's truly the man of my dreams, kind, loving, and supportive. We share a beautiful life, and he fits seamlessly into my large Mexican family, where everyone adores him. His respectful nature won them over instantly, and not a single person has ever spoken ill of him. We're a strong team, rarely experiencing conflict, except when it comes to his mother, who has a knack for causing friction. His family, on the other hand, is much smaller. Other than his parents, he has one sister who got married last year. His parents are conservative, small-town Christians, and Harper, in particular, is overbearing and controlling. She insists on family gatherings during every holiday, and if her expectations aren't met, drama inevitably follows. When I first met his family, I bonded easily with his father, William, who is calm and easygoing. His sister, who had been away at college and returned 4 years ago, also welcomed me with open arms, treating me like her own sister. But from the beginning, my interactions with Harper were difficult. When I told her about my career as an environmental consultant specializing in marine conservation, she barely reacted. My father-in-law, however, was impressed. Later, he confided in me that Harper had pressured my husband to break up with me, disapproving of me simply because I was passionate about my career. In her mind, that made me unfit for her son. Harper's old-fashioned ideals dictated that her son should marry someone who would be a traditional housewife, completely ignoring my professional dreams and fulfillment. Luckily, my husband fully supported my career, and our shared values only brought us closer, despite his mother's narrow-mindedness. At one point, my husband made it crystal clear to his father that Harper had no say in his choice of a spouse. This brought me so much relief. His unwavering defense of our relationship confirmed that I had made the right choice in staying with him, even after learning about his mother's disapproval. Unfortunately, over time, Harper's attitude only worsened. She constantly made passive-aggressive remarks, suggesting a proper wife should focus on homemaking and eagerly await her husband's return from work. Harper never hesitated to point out that I didn't fit her idea of a traditional wife. She criticized my appearance and, at times, questioned my ability to have children. At first, I shrugged off her comments, thinking they were jokes, but soon it became clear that she was serious. One evening at a dinner Harper insisted we attend. She went on a rant about how she missed the days when women stayed at home while men worked. My husband immediately pushed back, saying that times had changed and he loved having a partner who contributed equally, both financially and in running the household. Harper, clearly upset by his response, continued her rant about gender roles. Despite William's attempts to calm her down, she insisted she was only speaking her truth for her son's sake. After listening to her long enough, I quietly asked my husband to take me home, and without hesitation, we left. As we did, my husband exchanged a disappointed look with his mother. Later, when William called to smooth things over, I told him plainly that Harper's interference and outdated views weren't something I could tolerate anymore. William apologized on her behalf, but I wasn't ready to let it go just yet. My husband stood by me, making it clear that unless Harper gave a sincere apology, he might cut ties with her for good. This ultimatum seemed to get through to her, and she apologized. I accepted it but made it clear that such behavior couldn't happen again. Although Harper apologized, old habits die hard. Not long after we got married, I had to leave for a few weeks on a research expedition. During my time away, Harper called me, asking who would take care of the house and her son in my absence. I was taken aback by the question, so I put her on speakerphone so my husband, who was driving with me at the time, could hear. When I asked her to clarify what she meant, she accused me of being immature and suggested I quit my job to focus on supporting her son. My husband quickly intervened, firmly telling Harper that he was more than capable of taking care of himself and that our marriage was built on equality. We shared our responsibilities as partners. His response only upset her further, and she argued that our marriage was doomed if I didn't learn to be a proper wife. Frustrated, my husband told her to mind her own business and ended the call. During our engagement, Harper's displeasure had already surfaced. When she found out we were planning a small wedding, she wasn't happy. We were mindful of the costs, especially given the size of my family and our plans to move into our own place soon. I limited the guest list to close family members, with a plan for a larger celebration with extended family later. But Harper wanted to invite all her friends, whom she hadn't seen in years, viewing our wedding as an opportunity for a grand reunion. When my husband asked if she intended to pay for her guests, she was deeply offended, claiming that it was shameful for him to even suggest such a thing as his parent. We stood firm, making it clear that the wedding would stay small and that any extra guests she brought would be her financial responsibility. Despite her protests, she couldn't sway our plans. On the wedding day, Harper continued to be critical, particularly about my choice of wedding gown. I chose to ignore her negativity, determined to enjoy my special day. My sister-in-law, fully aware of the tension, stepped in and made a point to keep Harper away from me throughout the event. Then, in mid-April last year, we got the wonderful news that I was pregnant. Amid all the challenges with Harper, this was a bright moment for us. But when it came time for my gender reveal party, Harper became outraged after discovering that she wasn't involved in the planning. She showed up at our doorstep furious, accusing me of keeping her away from her future grandchild. She demanded that my husband take control of the situation and ensure she was more involved in the pregnancy. Her accusatory tone and the stress it caused were too much for my husband, who firmly asked her to leave. He warned her that if she continued this behavior, she risked being cut out of her grandchild's life permanently. Despite her tearful protests, claiming she only wanted what was best for us, she eventually left. The fallout from this episode was significant. William and Olivia reached out, deeply concerned about Harper's erratic behavior. Olivia, in particular, was shocked and urged me to focus on resting and not letting her mother's actions affect me. While we hoped this incident would be a wake-up call for Harper, her overbearing nature persisted. During the holiday season, when my husband informed her that we wouldn't be able to visit for Christmas due to my inability to travel long distances, Harper was furious. She accused him of distancing himself from his family and abruptly hung up when he refused to change our plans. We thought the issue had been settled, but a week later, she texted, insisting we come to her place. When my husband reminded her of our previous conversation, she called angrily, accusing me of keeping him away from his family and demanding that he control his woman. It was becoming clear that Harper's controlling and toxic behavior was escalating. I discussed everything with my husband and Olivia, who both supported me fully and acknowledged how troubling her actions were. Harper's attempts to manipulate and control were straining not just our relationship, but her relationships with everyone around her. The situation reached a peak when I went into preterm labor at 29 weeks. Our son was born via an emergency C-section at 30 weeks. In the rush, we didn't have time to inform anyone until after the birth. My husband shared the news on our family group chat, which led to a flood of congratulations. However, Harper had a meltdown, bombarding us with texts, furious that she hadn't been in the delivery room. Despite it being clear I would never have allowed that, she felt entitled. I chose not to respond, hoping to avoid further conflict. While I was focused on caring for our newborn, Harper found another reason to complain: our son's name. She claimed it sounded too Mexican and insisted we change it or use it as a middle name. We refused, but her disappointment lingered. When she finally met our son, she ignored his name altogether, using a made-up, special nickname she had chosen for him. Taken aback, my husband immediately asked her to stop and to respect our chosen name. Harper also disapproved of me breastfeeding, arguing it limited her time with the baby. She suggested formula feeding so she could have more interactions with him. My mother, who was staying with us, kindly explained the health benefits of breastfeeding, but Harper stubbornly insisted it was unfair. Her constant interference was becoming unbearable. Things escalated further when Harper demanded a lunch with me to discuss something urgent. After trying to avoid it, I eventually agreed. At lunch, after a few awkward pleasantries, she bluntly asked who would be our son's godparent. Bracing myself for her reaction, I explained that Olivia and I had agreed to be each other's children's godparents. Harper was livid. She burst into tears in the restaurant, loudly insisting that as the grandmother, she had the right to be our son's godmother. She claimed no one else could be trusted to care for him. Despite her dramatic outburst, I stood my ground and told her the decision was final, suggesting she discuss it with my husband if she wished to pursue it further. I later shared the ordeal with Olivia, who was equally upset that Harper didn't want her involved as the godmother. My husband, too, struggled to understand why his mother was acting so irrationally as her behavior continued to strain family relationships. Last week, Olivia gave birth to her daughter, and I was honored when she asked me to be by her side in the delivery room for support. Having gone through childbirth myself, I was more than happy to be there for her. I spent the night at the hospital while my husband and mother took care of our son. After Olivia's boyfriend arrived to support her, I returned home to rest and spend time with my family. During this time, Harper repeatedly called me, but I was too exhausted to deal with her and chose to focus on my son. Later that evening, my husband returned from visiting Olivia and shared surprising news. I initially thought it was about meeting his niece, but he revealed something far more unexpected. Olivia, having had enough of Harper's toxic behavior, decided to enforce a no-contact rule between Harper and her new daughter. When Harper had tried to visit the hospital unannounced, Olivia instructed the nurses to deny her entry, allowing only William to meet the baby. This decision was a bold and significant move, marking a turning point in how Olivia chose to deal with her mother. It was clear Harper's incessant calls that day were likely attempts to seek my help in persuading Olivia to allow her to see her granddaughter. Later, Olivia confided that her decision had been influenced by seeing how Harper had treated me over the years. Establishing a no-contact rule was her way of protecting her daughter from the same toxic influence. This was a watershed moment for Harper, who suddenly realized the full consequences of her actions. She had been completely shut out of her granddaughter's life from the start. It left me reflecting on whether we, too, should consider cutting ties with her permanently. The thought of such a drastic move was difficult, but the idea of protecting our son and maintaining our peace seemed more important. My husband has been incredibly supportive throughout all of this, but it's been a hard realization for him. Growing up in this environment, he hadn't recognized the toxicity until it began affecting me directly. After discussing everything with him and considering all we've been through, we decided that keeping a distance from Harper was the best decision for our family. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for our mental well-being. We arranged a group video call with Olivia and William to discuss our decision. They understood and supported us, recognizing that we needed to prioritize peace. All that remained was informing Harper of the choice we had made. Yesterday evening, my husband called his mother. As soon as she answered, she began berating him for the lack of communication and demanding to see our son. My husband waited patiently for her to finish before calmly explaining that he was now stepping up to protect his family. Harper was initially pleased, thinking this was the kind of authority she had always wanted him to exert, but her satisfaction turned to shock when he clarified that his way of protecting us meant cutting her off completely to shield our family from her toxicity. Initially, Harper was stunned, struggling to comprehend the gravity of my husband's words. When the reality of our decision sank in, she became desperate, threatening to come over, insisting nothing would stop her from seeing her grandson. My husband firmly warned her that if she showed up uninvited, we would call the police for trespassing. Harper then turned her anger on me, accusing me of orchestrating the entire situation and tearing the family apart. My husband countered her accusations, making it clear that the decision was his. He reminded her that Olivia had also chosen to distance herself for the same reasons, pointing out that the problem lay with her behavior. Harper, refusing to accept responsibility, continued her tirade, accusing me of brainwashing her children and alienating them from her. As my husband's frustration grew, he told her that if she was looking for someone to blame, she should start by reflecting on her own actions. Her bitterness and discriminatory attitudes had driven everyone away. Finally, he told her that everyone had grown tired of her negativity and toxicity. With that, he blocked her number, cutting off all communication. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but it was necessary for our family's well-being. After my husband's decisive conversation, I followed suit and blocked Harper's number as well. I informed my family about the situation, advising them not to engage with her for the time being. It's a tough reality for my husband and Olivia, losing the support of their mother, but we're relieved to be free from her constant drama. It's been 3 months since this all unfolded, and I'm happy to report that our son is thriving. Olivia and I have grown even closer, and our children enjoy regular playdates. Watching their bond develop is heartwarming, and I treasure the thought of them growing up as best friends. In even more exciting news, Olivia is preparing to marry the father of her child, and we're all looking forward to celebrating her upcoming wedding. As for Harper, our decision to maintain no contact remains unchanged. For those concerned about our safety, we've taken precautions, including installing security cameras and changing our locks, ensuring Harper cannot disrupt our peace. Given how widely known the reasons for our estrangement are, it's unlikely she would risk a public confrontation, especially now that the scrutiny from others is likely weighing on her. Despite our boundaries, Harper attempted to use William to reconnect, urging him to mediate a reconciliation. However, even William has reached his limit with her. He shared his own frustrations, and for the first time, it seemed to spark some introspection on her part. A few weeks after their discussion, Harper expressed, through William, a desire to apologize for her actions toward me. While it's hard to know if her remorse is genuine, we've chosen to maintain our distance and continue living our lives without her involvement. William and other supportive family members visit regularly, ensuring our son is surrounded by love and stability, free from unnecessary drama. This peaceful setup is exactly how we plan to move forward. At 24, I married my husband after 4 years of being together, but instead of the beach wedding we had always dreamed of, filled with the joyful memories we created there, we ended up having a small, intimate ceremony at his aunt's farmhouse. I had diligently saved for 3 years from my job as an editorial photographer, envisioning a beautiful seaside celebration surrounded by friends and family. However, our plans took a dramatic turn a few months prior when my parents urgently asked to borrow $210,100. They claimed it was for crucial medical treatment for my father, whose sudden illness was supposedly a result of complications from diabetes. They said he needed an expensive imported medication that wasn't covered by insurance. Concerned for his well-being, I didn't hesitate to lend them the money, believing I was helping cover essential medical expenses. As time passed, however, my suspicions began to grow. My mother consistently dodged my requests for medical documentation, and during my visits, my father, although always in bed, didn't seem as ill as they had described. I hesitated to confront them, fearing the fallout if I was wrong. In the midst of this, I learned that my brother Jack had gone on his honeymoon in Europe, funded by the money I had lent our parents under the guise of a medical emergency. He had intended to keep this a secret until he returned, hoping to surprise everyone with stories and photos. This revelation came only after I expressed my concerns about our father's condition, prompting Jack to finally address the issue. Feeling deeply betrayed and manipulated, my husband and I decided to keep our wedding plans quiet and opted for the farmhouse instead. We didn't want to involve my family, who had misused my trust and resources. This choice strained my relationship with my parents, leading to significant emotional and financial repercussions for them. As I withdrew my financial support, after Jack's lavish honeymoon, which our parents funded to the tune of $27,700, I confronted them about the situation. When my mother first requested $210,100 for my father's supposed urgent medical treatment, I didn't hesitate. She mentioned the need for a rare, expensive drug, and given my father's claimed critical condition, I felt it was my duty to help. Yet, as I continued my visits, the severity of the illness they portrayed didn't match my observations. My father didn't appear as unwell as they claimed, and my repeated requests for medical records were brushed aside. I had my doubts but held back from accusing them without solid evidence, wanting to avoid causing family strife over what could be unfounded suspicions. The truth finally came to light when I discussed my concerns with Jack. He casually mentioned his extravagant honeymoon, oblivious to any health crisis at home. It was shocking, especially in light of the urgency my parents had conveyed to me. He revealed that our parents had covered his honeymoon expenses, which included luxury hotel stays, fine dining, and shopping sprees. It became clear to me that there was no medical emergency. My parents had fabricated the entire scenario to redirect my wedding funds toward Jack's honeymoon. The realization that my hard-earned savings were misused left me feeling a profound sense of betrayal. When confronted, my parents admitted to fabricating the medical emergency, justifying that it was the only way they could persuade me to part with the money. They wanted to give Jack a memorable gift without touching their retirement savings, believing I was young and would easily earn the money back. They rationalized that this was a crucial moment for Jack, who needed a break from work-related stress. Their justifications did little to quell my anger. I had scrimped and saved, living modestly to fund my own wedding, and their actions had not only misled me but forced me to scale down my plans significantly. I insisted they repay me before my wedding, as I needed those funds to cover the costs associated with a beach ceremony, which my husband's family was helping with but couldn't fully finance. My parents had made it clear that they could either fund my college education or my wedding, not both. I chose education, knowing I would self-finance my wedding. This situation led me to rethink my entire wedding plans, opting for a smaller, more intimate ceremony at my husband's aunt's farmhouse. While this wasn't the wedding I had envisioned, it transformed into a celebration of our love, untouched by the deceit that loomed over my original dreams. Years later, when Jack began college, I casually asked him if our parents had ever made him choose between funding his education or a wedding, just as they had with me. He laughed, suggesting he hadn't faced the same ultimatum. At the time, I didn't press the issue with my parents. I was still financially reliant on them, having yet to secure a job, and I didn't want to stir family drama by pointing out their apparent favoritism. The issue resurfaced dramatically when I confronted them about using my wedding savings to fund Jack's lavish honeymoon. Despite their denials, it was evident they favored him. I insisted they repay me. unwilling to compromise my wedding dreams because of Jack's job struggles. They could spoil him at their expense, but it was unfair to redirect my hard-earned savings. They responded that they couldn't repay the full amount before my wedding and argued it could take years to do so. They insisted that nothing was more important than family, rationalizing that if I was willing to help with a medical emergency, I should also support Jack's mental health. However, Jack's work issues stemmed from his lackadaisical attitude toward his commission-based web design job. He wasn't genuinely troubled by his job performance. He simply had never learned to strive hard due to a lifetime of being coddled by our parents. I stressed to my parents how crucial this wedding was, not just for me, but also for my future in-laws, as I had financial commitments that I could no longer meet without the funds they had taken. Yet my parents remained firm, insisting they couldn't return the money in time for the wedding. I found myself pleading with them, but their hearts were stone cold, and they assured me they would eventually repay me, just not in time to meet my needs. Leaving their house in tears, I felt utterly defeated. When I confided in my husband, his frustration mirrored mine. He was just as disheartened and angered by my parents' empty promises and their lack of empathy for our situation. In his fury, he considered contacting a lawyer. However, I pointed out that it would be pointless since all our agreements with my parents had been verbal. There was no written evidence that my mother had claimed the money was for medical expenses or that she had promised to repay it. Without contracts, documents, or even text messages to support our claims, pursuing a legal case seemed not only weak but also potentially costly and fruitless. Reluctantly, we decided against any legal action and instead focused on adapting our wedding plans, viewing it as a more constructive use of our energy and resources. In a fortunate twist, my husband's family stepped up to help. His aunt generously offered her farmhouse as a venue free of charge. While it wasn't the beach setting we had envisioned, the farmhouse was beautiful and inviting. Upon visiting, I immediately felt a connection to the place. It was perfect for us given the circumstances. With the venue secured, I dove into wedding planning, which provided a much-needed distraction and solidified my resolve to distance myself from my parents. Initially, I was uncertain about inviting Jack. He hadn't been aware of the funding switch, so his direct involvement felt minimal. However, when he returned from his honeymoon and chastised me for demanding the money back from our parents, claiming Jack's comments made me realize I was making a big deal out of nothing, insisting I should just suck it up and downsize my wedding. His lack of empathy and understanding made it clear that I couldn't invite him. As we moved forward with our plans, the reality of having a less extravagant wedding than I had originally envisioned began to settle in. Surprisingly, this worked out for the best. The scaled-down wedding turned out to be not only beautiful but also a true reflection of who we were, rather than an image we felt pressured to project. It was intimate and genuine, filled with people who truly supported us. Looking back, the constraints imposed by my parents' actions and the resulting reduction in our budget stripped away any pretense, highlighting what was truly important, celebrating our union with those who cared for us unconditionally. The day was perfect because it focused on us, a celebration of our love and commitment rather than an extravagant display. In deciding to scale back our lavish wedding plans, my husband and I chose a more meaningful path. We allocated our budget thoughtfully, prioritizing what truly mattered, being surrounded by those who genuinely cared for us on our special day. The outcome was a dreamy, beautiful ceremony without the unnecessary pomp, proving that a wedding doesn't have to be grand to be memorable. After the wedding, I intentionally shared photos on social media, having ensured that everyone invited kept the event a secret to avoid drama from my parents and Jack. Given our strained relationships, they weren't informed about the wedding, allowing us to enjoy a peaceful, intimate celebration without their interference. However, the day after I posted the wedding photos, my parents and Jack confronted me via phone, demanding to know why they hadn't been invited. Surprisingly, they seemed to expect an invitation despite our last painful interactions, where I had left their house in tears after a heated argument and hadn't spoken to them since. My last conversation with Jack had also left me feeling blamed and hurt. I explained that after they misused my wedding fund, I had to drastically cut costs and decided to invite only close family and friends who genuinely supported us. Their absence was a direct result of their actions and the pain they had caused. Feeling unapologetic yet firm, I ended the call and blocked them, hoping to move forward without further conflict. An hour later, my husband informed me that Jack had reached out to him, sharing that my mother was devastated by my words and had cried to the point of nearly fainting, though I suspected this might be an exaggeration. Hearing this filled me with a surge of guilt. I questioned whether I had been too harsh, despite their betrayal. Now, a week later, I find myself contemplating the consequences of my decisions during and after the wedding. It's a complex mix of relief for having a beautiful celebration that felt true to us and lingering sadness over the deepening family rift, leaving me to wonder if things could have been handled differently. After that last intense conversation with my parents and Jack, I resolved to cut off communication with them. My mother's tears wouldn't change the truth of the situation. On the day I confronted them about the misuse of my wedding fund, I had been the one in tears, desperately pleading for them to return the money before my wedding. They dismissed my feelings, treating the matter lightly, so I chose to distance myself and minimize their impact on my life. It's true what they say, you reap what you sow. I explicitly told Jack to cease contact, acting on behalf of both myself and my husband. My husband was uninvolved in these family issues, and I wanted to shield him from their petty antics. After sending that message, I blocked Jack to cut off any remaining access they had to me. My family had mistreated me for years, and I was determined not to tolerate it any longer. While a lawsuit seemed far-fetched given the lack of tangible evidence, my husband believed it was worth exploring. He began consulting with a reputable lawyer, and we planned to decide soon whether to pursue legal action. Our goal was to hold my parents accountable for misleading me about the supposed emergency that diverted my money into Jack's lavish honeymoon. Proving this in court would be challenging, but I felt compelled to ensure they were held responsible. I deserved my money back, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to make that happen. Yesterday, I emphasized to Jack the importance of keeping my husband out of our family drama. Ironically, this led him to do the exact opposite. After work, my husband informed me that my parents and Jack had bombarded him with texts, demanding that he convince me to unblock them. When he ignored their messages, they escalated things by showing up at his workplace, waiting outside and following his car when he left, honking until he pulled over, knowing they wouldn't relent and might follow him home. He decided to confront them directly to prevent further disturbances at our house. They met at a nearby diner for a private discussion. Inside, Jack approached my husband's car window and insisted they talk in person. Once seated, Jack expressed his belief that our parents were deeply hurt by my actions and that family should come first, suggesting that we should reconcile. However, my husband, having witnessed the distress and manipulation I'd endured, stood firmly by my side. We both agreed it was essential not to let their guilt tactics sway us from protecting our peace and pursuing what felt right. After the last tumultuous conversation with my parents and Jack, I resolved to cut ties completely. My family viewed my decision to sever contact over the mishandling of my wedding fund as excessive and even accused me of overreacting by suggesting we weren't family anymore. They attempted to reach out through my husband, hoping he could persuade me to reconsider, emphasizing that family should stick together despite the financial issues. They reiterated their promise to return the money but insisted it couldn't be done all at once, citing Jack's work struggles and their impending retirement as reasons for the delay. My husband played a crucial role during this interaction. Instead of confronting them directly, he cleverly made them feel heard, suggesting that a heartfelt message from them might help resolve the conflict. Naively, they took his advice, thinking it could soften my stance and lead to reconciliation. Little did they know, my husband was subtly steering them to admit their actions in writing, providing us with the evidence we needed to pursue legal action. I must admit I'm quite impressed, and even a bit proud, of how ingeniously my husband handled the situation. His strategy paid off, and soon we received an email from my parents outlining their deceptions and essentially confessing to their misuse of my funds. This email was the admission of guilt we needed to move forward legally. We are now working with our lawyer to recover the $210,100, money that represents 4 years of hard work, careful saving, and personal sacrifices. It's not just about the amount, it's about justice and principle. My parents and Jack made their choices, and now they must face the consequences. Amidst this legal battle, we've also begun planning our honeymoon. We're opting for a modest getaway to the beach, a place of special significance for us, marking both the beginning of our relationship challenges and a spot filled with countless happy memories. This decision reflects our realization that happiness doesn't require grand gestures or excessive spending. The essence of our life together lies in enjoying simple, meaningful moments. This experience has profoundly reminded me that we control our happiness and the direction of our lives, not the expectations or actions of others. Now, we look forward to a future filled with love, integrity, and the simple joys that truly bring us contentment. My name is Ava, and at 27 years old, I was living the life I'd always dreamed of with my husband in our stunning dream house, a reward for years of hard work. The house boasted a spacious garden and a refreshing pool. Both of us were thriving in our careers, me as a lawyer and him as a doctor. Everything was perfect until the day his parents moved in. What initially seemed like a temporary solution to their financial troubles turned into an indefinite arrangement. As the weeks went by, his parents began to settle in, imposing their rules and preferences on our home. I quickly realized that this temporary situation was becoming a permanent fixture, and I felt increasingly out of place. This story centers around the confrontation I had with my in-laws in front of their son. They arrived unexpectedly one night, sharing the devastating news that they had lost their home and savings to a scam. Faced with no other options, my husband turned to me with a heartfelt plea. "Ava, something terrible has happened. Mom and Dad have nowhere else to turn. They're devastated, and we need your help. Can we let them stay until they get back on their feet?" Caught off guard but wanting to be supportive, I assured them, "Of course, we'll figure this out together. Stay with us, and we'll get through this." Filled with gratitude, they replied, "Thank you both so much for your kindness. We promise we'll find a way to repay you. Family supports each other, after all." "Mr. Henry, our priority is helping you rebuild your lives," I reassured them. "Ava, thank you. We'll do everything we can to get back on our feet quickly." Before they moved in, I had planned a brief break from work to recharge. Little did I know they would misinterpret my time off as being unemployed. Just 2 days after their arrival, my mother-in-law approached me with well-intentioned but misguided concern. I was taken aback by her blunt question, not expecting such a conversation so soon. "Why aren't you working? Do you depend entirely on Abel for financial support?" she asked. "Oh no, it's not that. I took a few days off to relax and recharge. I'll be back to work soon," I explained. "Well, dear, it might be a burden for Abel if you don't manage your expenses. You should think about being financially independent." "I appreciate your concern, Jack, but I assure you I'm not relying entirely on Abel for our expenses. I have my own income and contribute to our household finances. This break is simply for self-care, and once I'm back at work, everything will return to normal." "Okay, dear, I just wanted to make sure everything is all right. You know we care about you both." "Thank you, Jack. I understand your worries, and I truly appreciate your concern for our well-being. I promise I'll be back at work soon, and we'll manage our finances as we always have." After that conversation, the dynamics between my in-laws and me soured. Whenever I mustered the courage to ask for financial assistance, I sensed their disapproving glares and irritation. One day, as I walked by the living room, I overheard a conversation between my father-in-law and mother-in-law. "I don't understand why she refuses to work. She's been jobless for weeks and seems to rely solely on Abel's wealth for her shopping sprees. I spoke with her, and she claims she handles all the expenses, but I see her asking for money from Abel constantly. I've always had my doubts about her. She must think we're naive, believing she can take advantage of Abel's hard-earned money without lifting a finger herself. We need to talk to either Abel or Ava about this. I don't support their decisions." My heart sank as I listened to their misguided assumptions. They had painted me as a lazy gold digger, squandering Abel's money on frivolous shopping instead of contributing to our home. I had always envisioned a harmonious family life, and after marrying Abel, I was unaware that his parents had different expectations of me. Every day, I found myself at the beck and call of my in-laws, who seemed to take pleasure in bossing me around. They treated me like a gold digger, assuming I depended entirely on their son for everything. This behavior created a toxic dynamic in our home, making me feel more like a servant than a valued family member. The strain of this dynamic was most evident during mealtimes. While I tirelessly prepared all the meals, my mother-in-law and father-in-law would lounge around, seemingly oblivious to my efforts. They expected me to cater to their every whim, even asking for something as simple as a glass of water as if it were my duty to serve them. "Ava, dear, could you please put Daniel's and my clothes into the laundry? I'm so tired," my mother-in-law would say. "Sure, I'll do it," I would respond, though inside I felt resentful. They would ask for water 9 or 10 times a day, and the house was a perpetual mess. Even our maid was worn out from their behavior, Cleaning the floors had become a regular task due to their constant spills. The TV blared variety shows at full volume, giving me headaches whenever I tried to concentrate on my work. Interruptions were inevitable. One day, my mother-in-law requested medicine, insisting I go to the pharmacy myself instead of using an online delivery service. I explained that the online pharmacy could deliver in half an hour, which was the same time it would take me to get it myself. Despite the extra cost of my personal effort, she called me lazy, claiming I should comply with her requests since her son was financially supporting me. I defended my work, emphasizing the importance of the documents I was handling, but she dismissed my efforts. You should remember that your husband supports you, and we built this household together. He committed to ensuring our well-being while you enjoy the comforts of this home. I couldn't hide my disappointment any longer. Your disrespectful and ungrateful attitude is increasingly evident. The serene atmosphere we once had is unraveling. Your presence has injected tension into our happy home, making it feel suffocating. The constant meddling and unsolicited advice from you and your husband have created a growing divide between Daniel and me. In the midst of this turmoil, I felt lost and unsure of whom to confide in. I turned to my best friend, Diane, seeking her insights. Several weeks ago, we graciously welcomed my in-laws into our home after they lost their house and savings to a scam. What began as a kind gesture has turned into an absolute nightmare. I continued, they are the most discourteous and ungrateful individuals imaginable. Their behavior is unbearable. They treat me like a servant and a stranger, constantly finding fault in everything I do. It's as if they believe they own the house and everything in it. Their demanding nature shows no signs of slowing, and they expect everything to be done according to their preferences. They use our belongings carelessly, squandering our resources. Our once peaceful home has devolved into a noisy, messy, and chaotic environment. Living under these conditions is incredibly frustrating. It feels like I'm trapped in a state of constant chaos and stress. Their actions leave me feeling devalued and unappreciated. It's disheartening to think they would treat a family member, especially their own, so poorly. I've tried to address these issues, hoping for a resolution, but it only seems to make matters worse. Currently, while I'm on a work break, they assume I'm jobless and entirely reliant on my husband, Abel, for support. Despite having my own savings, their disrespect and presumptions make me feel like a burden rather than a partner. My dream home has transformed into a nightmare, and I know I need to find a way out of this situation. I confided in Jocelyn, who suggested I talk to Abel about the situation with his parents. She was right. He needed to understand their wrongful behavior. Gathering my courage, I planned a conversation with him, knowing we had to address these growing familial tensions. When the moment arrived, I voiced my concerns. Honey, isn't it time your parents found their own place? It's been months, and I miss having our space to ourselves. He replied, I understand, but they're still not financially stable. I can't just ask them to leave. I acknowledged his point and said, I'm not suggesting we abandon them, but we deserve our space too. Remember, this was our dream house. It's just a matter of a few more days. They'll leave soon. However, as the days turned into weeks, my frustration grew. The once joyful conversations at the dinner table devolved into tense silences. I could feel my husband's attention slipping away, as if he was gradually being pulled under by his parents' demands. One day, while Abel was at work, his parents asked to have a serious conversation with me. Their stern expressions set the tone for what was to come. As we sat down, they began, Listen, we need to talk. We've come to a decision. We think it's time for you to leave. We don't like you or trust you, and we feel like you're just using our son for his money. You're jobless, and we see you as a gold digger. Stunned by their accusations, I quickly protested. That's not true. I love your son genuinely. I didn't marry him for his money. I married him out of real love. But their perspective was entirely different. They claimed I was a detrimental influence on him, insisting that he deserved someone better. They unequivocally demanded that I exit his life and vacate their home, presenting it as my only chance to comply. Desperate for understanding, I asked if we could discuss the matter further. Their response was cold and dismissive. They stated that their decision was final. Confounded and seeking clarity, I pressed them for their rationale. They bluntly declared that they didn't believe my love for their son was genuine. They accused me of being motivated solely by financial gain, ignoring my explanation that my current break from work was a conscious choice for personal development. I pleaded with them, emphasizing that my commitment to their son wasn't driven by money. I recounted our early days together when he was just a student, stressing that I married him for love, not financial gain. Yet their skepticism persisted, insinuating that I had opportunistically seized upon his potential. I explained how I had supported him in his aspirations without seeking material gain, but they remained adamant in their conviction that I was after his wealth. I asserted my rights as his wife, reminding them that I had a legitimate claim on him. However, they accused me of manipulation, contending that my kindness was merely a facade. Despite my attempts to reconcile, they labeled me a negative influence and refused to consider the possibility of finding common ground. Frustrated and distressed, I implored them to reconsider, expressing my genuine desire to salvage my marriage. Yet their uncompromising stance left me grappling with the reality of losing the love and partnership I cherished. It's too late for that. We've already made arrangements for you to leave in a week. A week? That's hardly enough time. Please reconsider. No, our decision is final. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I never thought you would treat me this way. It's for the best. You're not right for our son, and we won't allow you to ruin his life. You can't control our lives like this. We're adults, and we can make our own decisions. We know what's best for him, and he will thank us one day. Well, I won't leave without a fight. I love him, and I won't let you tear us apart. We'll see about that, but mark our words, you are not welcome here anymore. As they delivered their ultimatum, I felt a strange mix of amusement and disbelief at the unfolding drama. However, their assumption that I was jobless was glaring. It was time to set the record straight. Let me clarify, I am not jobless or a gold digger, as you seem to think. I am a successful lawyer with a thriving career and financial independence. Oh, is that so? Why should we believe you? You ask Abel for money from time to time, they challenged. I think you're mistaken. That couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, I contribute equally to our household expenses and even help pay for half of the house we used to live in. I have all the legal documents to prove it. More importantly, despite recent events, it's crucial to understand that my husband and I have a loving and strong marriage. We've faced financial challenges, but our relationship is built on love and mutual support. Upon revealing my successful career, one of them scornfully dismissed it as delusion. The irony was not lost on me. They were the ones evading the authorities. I could see their faces pale as the weight of their actions began to sink in, shattering the veneer of comfort they had worn for so long and exposing their unscrupulous nature. In response to their incredulous denial, I dropped a bombshell. I discovered your little scam, and I've reported it to the authorities. You're not victims. You're criminals who have deceived and swindled countless people out of their hard-earned money. Their protests and accusations of preposterousness held no ground. It's not just an accusation. The evidence is overwhelming. The police are actively searching for you, and it's only a matter of time before you face the court. Their incredulity deepened. This can't be happening. We're respected members of society. I countered. Respected members do not cheat innocent people out of their money. You thought you could get away with it, but justice will prevail. The law will catch up to you, and you'll face the consequences of your actions. Outraged, they attempted to shift the blame. How could you betray us like this? We are your husband's parents. I betrayed you first when you tried to trick me into leaving my own house. So many innocent people have suffered because of your actions. I won't stand idly by while you harm more lives. The truth will prevail, and you will be held accountable for your crimes. But it was a misunderstanding. We thought you were a bad influence on our son. Yes, that's correct, and I believe you are a bad influence on our lives, which I made sure to report to the authorities. You're bluffing. No, I'm not. You're criminals who have cheated hundreds of people out of their hard-earned money. The police are after you, and it's only a matter of time before they catch up. As our conversation reached its peak, a knock on the door interrupted us. Opening it, I found police officers standing there, ready to take my in-laws into custody. They had tirelessly tracked them down for months and were grateful for the tip I had provided. Are these the individuals you reported? Yes, officers, these are the ones. The officers wasted no time. They swiftly handcuffed my in-laws and read them their rights. Their faces turned pale as the reality of their situation set in. We've been after them for quite some time. Thank you for your cooperation. Your tip-off has helped us bring these criminals to justice. You're welcome, officers. I couldn't stand by while they continued to harm innocent people. It's good to see justice being served. With my in-laws now in police custody, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The deception had been exposed, and they would face the consequences of their actions. The police officers expressed their gratitude once more before escorting my in-laws away. Later that day, when Abel returned from work, I knew it was time to share the whole story with him. I laid out the details of his parents' financial misdeeds, not holding back any information. To my relief, Abel stood by my side, understanding the depth of their betrayal and the necessity of consequences. "We'll get through this together," he reassured me. Finally, I felt a deep sense of gratitude that our home now belonged to us, and no one could invade our privacy. Once again, our peaceful life was back on track, with his parents facing the consequences of their actions.